Welcome to Brainish English Stories.
Elfride Swancourt was a girl who showed her feelings easily. People who knew about her life could understand her feelings better. She was a mix of many interesting things, but what made her special was how these things came together. When you talked to her, you couldn't easily see what she looked like. This wasn't because she had a polished way of speaking. She actually talked like a child, but because her words were simple and charming. She hadn't been around many people, so she wasn't very socially aware for her age. But one thing everyone noticed about Elfride was her eyes. They showed her true self, and you didn't need to look at anything else to understand her. Her eyes were blue like the sky on a sunny day in September. They were misty and deep, making you feel like you were looking into them, not just at them. Elfride didn't have a strong presence. Some women can fill a room with their personality, but Elfride was more like a kitten, gentle and quiet. She had a kind of thoughtfulness that you see in paintings, like the Madonna della Sedia. She had warmth like the women in paintings by Rubens. Sometimes her face showed deep thoughts, like the women in paintings by Correggio. The day Elfride met a man who was a stranger changed her life. It was a winter afternoon, and her father, who was a vicar and a widower, was sick with gout. After she finished her chores, Elfride felt restless and went to check on her father. She knocked on his door, and he always told her to come in with a loud voice. "Papa," she said to her dad, who was 40 and looked nice with his red face, lying on the bed in his robe and groaning now and then from his sore toe. "Won't you come downstairs tonight?" "I'm afraid not, HH. I really can't stand anything on this toe of mine, piff PHPH. I won't get up till tomorrow." "I hope that man from London won't come then, or I wouldn't know what to do, Papa." "Well, it would be a bit awkward. I don't think he'd come today." "Why?" "Because it's so windy." "Wind." You have funny ideas, Elfride. Wind can't stop a man from coming. If he does come, send him up to me and make sure he gets some food and rest. What a bother all this is. Should I make him dinner? No, too heavy. Maybe just tea. Not enough. How about a high tea? We have cold chicken, pie, and snacks. Yes, high tea. Do I have to serve him tea, Papa? Of course, you're the hostess. But sitting with a stranger, talking like we know each other, without an introduction? Nonsense, dear. He's tired and hungry. It's not about being polite tonight. It's about helping out because I can't. Nothing scary about that. You've read too many novels. Oh, okay. It's not so bad when it's necessary like this. But usually, you're there when we have guests, even if we know them. This strange man from London might find it odd. Well, let him. Is he Mr. Hubie's friend? I don't think so. He might be. How old is he, I wonder? I don't know. You can read my letter to Mr. Hubie and his reply on the table in the study. Then you'll know as much as I do about him. I already read them. Well, why ask then? They have all the information I have. Agach. Oh, you young troublemaker. Don't put anything there. I can't stand the weight, he grumbled as Elfride removed the rug from his feet, thinking he might be cold. When she saw he wasn't upset anymore, she left the room and went downstairs again. Later that afternoon, two men were seen on top of a hill in the distance. They looked like shadows, sitting in a cart and moving against the wind. There were no houses or people around, just the twilight sky with Jupiter shining brightly and Sirius glowing nearby. The only lights came from distant red spots on the hills, where fires were burning for farming. The wind was still strong, with a few clouds moving southward. They had traveled 14 out of 16 miles from the train station when they reached a valley with more vegetation and signs of better farming. Further ahead, they saw a mansion through the trees. "That's Endlestowe House, Lord Luxellian's," said the driver. "Endlestowe House, Lord Luxellian's," repeated the other without much interest. He turned to look at the barely visible house with a curiosity that seemed out of place. "Yes, that's Lord Luxellian's," he said again after a moment, still gazing in that direction. "Are we going there?" "No, we're going to Endlestowe Vicarage, like I told you." "I thought you might have changed your mind, sir, the way you've been staring at nothing for so long." "Oh no, I'm just interested in the house, that's all. Most people are, they say." "Not in the same way I am." "Oh, well, his family is no better than mine, you know." "How come?" "They were farmers and laborers. But once, a long time ago, one of them, while working, swapped clothes with King Charles II and saved his life. The king approached him like any other man and said, 'Man in the smock, I'm Charles II, and that's the truth. Can I borrow your clothes?' 'Sure,' said Hedger Luxellian, and they swapped right then and there. Now remember, King Charles said as he left, 'If I become king, come to court, knock on the door and ask, "Is King Charles II home?" Give your name, and they'll let you in, and you'll become a lord.' Wasn't that nice of him?" "Very nice indeed." Well, the king did become king, and years later, Hedger Luxellian went to the king's door and asked if King Charles II was home. "No," they said. "Then is Charles III here?" asked Hedger Luxellian. "Yes," said a young man with a crown on his head, "I'm Charles III. And I think there might be a mistake. I don't remember anything about Charles III in English history," said the other mildly. "Oh, it's true history, just not written down. He was a bit odd, if you recall." "All right, continue." Anyway, Hedger Luxellian became a lord somehow, and everything was fine until he had a big argument with King Charles IV. "I can't stand Charles IV. Really, that's too much." "Why? There was a George IV, wasn't there?" "Of course." "Well, there are as many Charleses as there are Georges. But let's not talk about it anymore. Well, it's the strangest world I've ever lived in. Really, it is. Oh, the things that happen. As they talked, the dusk turned into darkness, and the shape and surface of the mansion gradually vanished. The windows, once dark spots against the lighter wall, lit up and became squares of light against the dark night landscape. They didn't speak for a while as they climbed one hill after another. Then, they reached a plateau from which they could see two lighthouses on the coast ahead, glowing peacefully on the horizon. They descended into a little valley, where the driver guided the horse sharply, going down a slope like a rabbit's burrow. They went lower and lower. "Endlestow Vicarage is around here," said the man with the reins. "This part is West Endlestow. Lord Luxellian's is East Endlestow and has its own church. Parson Swancourt is the pastor of both and goes between them. It's a funny world. There used to be a quarry where this house stands. The man who built it dug up all the soil for the vicarage and made a little garden of flowers and trees with it, while the fields he dug up have been useless ever since." "How long has the current pastor been here?" "Maybe about a year or a year and a half. Not 2 years yet. People usually start gossiping about the pastor after 2 years. But he's a very nice man. Parson Swancourt knows me well because I often drive over here, and I know Parson Swancourt." They came out of the trees, rounded a curve, and saw the chimneys and gables of the vicarage in the dark. There were no lights. They got off the cart, and the man felt his way to the porch and rang the bell. After waiting patiently for 3 or 4 minutes without any response, the stranger stepped forward and rang the bell again, more firmly this time. He thought he heard footsteps and the doorknob turning, but still no one appeared. "Maybe they're not home," sighed the driver. "And I was looking forward to some supper in Parson Swancourt's kitchen. They have such delicious meat pies, fig cakes, cider, and cordial here. Who goes there, rich or poor, that you must come to the end of the world at this hour?" shouted a voice suddenly, and they turned to see a shabby-looking person coming from the back door, holding a lantern. "At this hour? It's only 7 o'clock. Shine the light and let us in, William Worm." "Oh, is that you, Robert Lickpan?" "No one else, William Worm." "And has the visitor arrived?" "Yes," said the stranger. "Is Mr. Swancourt home?" "He is, sir." "Would you mind coming around the back? The front door is stuck because of the rain, and Turk can't open it. I know I'm just a poor old man who'll never be worth much in the Lord's eyes, but I can show you the way in, sir." The newcomer followed his guide through a small door in the wall and walked through a scullery and a kitchen, keeping his eyes straight ahead, not wanting to pry into the rooms at the back. When they reached the hall, Elfride came out from the inner lobby of the front entrance, where she had gone to see why they were delayed. Her surprise at seeing the visitor emerge from under the stairs showed that she hadn't expected this unexpected entrance, engineered entirely by William Worm's cleverness. Elfride was in a charming semi-casual attire, with curly hair cascading around her shoulders. She looked a bit uneasy, not quite woman enough for the situation. The visitor took off his hat, and they exchanged introductions. Elfride, relieved to see the pleasant and young man before her instead of the old, serious businessman she had imagined, couldn't help smiling, almost laughing at the newcomer's face. Stephen Smith, who has been hidden by the darkness until now, was at this time just a young man, barely an adult. Looking at him, one wouldn't think he belonged in London at all. His face didn't seem like it could survive in the midst of all that smoke and mud. His appearance was far from the tired and worn look of city life. His skin was as smooth and pink as Elfride's. His mouth was perfect, like Cupid's bow, and his lips were as red as hers. He had bright curly hair, sparkling blue-gray eyes, and a youthful blush. He didn't even have a beard, except for a light fuzz on his upper lip. This was the London businessman whose arrival had worried Elfride so much. Elfride quickly apologized and explained to him that her father couldn't see him that evening because he was unwell. Mr. Smith, in a voice that was youthful but also confident, said he didn't mind at all. Stephen was then shown to his room. While he was away, Elfride slipped into her father's room. "He's here, Papa." Such a young man for a businessman. "Oh, really? His face is, well, pretty, just like mine." What next? "Nothing. That's all I know about him so far." "It's rather nice, isn't it?" "Well, we'll see when we get to know him better. Go down and offer him something to eat and drink, please. And when he's done eating, tell him I'd like to have a chat with him, if he's willing to come up here." Elfride went downstairs again, and while she waited for young Smith to arrive, let's take a look at the letters concerning his visit. 1. Mr. Swancourt to Mr. Hubie, Endlestowe Vicarage, February 18th, 18. Dear Sir, we are planning to repair the tower and aisle of the church in our parish. Lord Luxellian, the patron of the living, suggested your name as a reliable architect to oversee the work. I don't know much about the first steps, but if you're willing to help, the first thing would be for you or someone from your team to come and see the building and report back to satisfy the parishioners and others. The place is very remote. We don't have a railway within 14 miles, and the nearest place to stay, Castle Botterill, is 2 miles further on. So, it would be most convenient for you to stay at the vicarage, which I'm happy to offer, instead of going to the hotel in Castle Botterill and coming back in the morning. We're ready to receive you any day next week that you choose. Yours sincerely, Christopher Swancourt. 2. Mr. Hubie to Mr. Swancourt, Percy Place, Charing Cross, February 20th, 18. Dear Sir, in response to your request of the 18th, I have arranged for my assistant, Mr. Stephen Smith, to survey and make drawings of the aisle and tower of your parish church and note any damages for restoration. He will leave London by the early train tomorrow morning. Thank you for offering to accommodate him. He will accept and will probably arrive at your house in the evening. You can trust him and rely on his expertise in church architecture. I hope the restoration plans I prepare from his survey will satisfy you and Lord Luxellian. Yours faithfully, Walter Hubie.